The last practice of Eagles training camp was wild, with Derek Barnett once again instigating a fight, Jason Kelce taking a cheap shot, which started an absolute brawl, Sidney Brown delivered another jarring hit, and DeVonta Smith straight up mossed everyone. So let's talk about it, but first, let's run it. Alright, so let's just get right into it. The Eagles hosted the Indianapolis Colts for joint practice with former offensive coordinator Shane Steichen back in town, and practice was definitely a really solid one until Kelce delivered a cheap shot during 11-on-11s on Indy linebacker Zaire Franklin. And no, I'm not talking about Travis Kelce, although that would have been much more believable given the Kansas City tight end propensity to lose his cool getting in multiple fights or altercations during Chiefs camp, but this is Jason Kelce we're talking about. You know, sexy Batman, world's greatest dad, or Mr. I'll sign your baby, except as you probably know by now, Kelce was none of those things on Tuesday. After running back Kenny Gainwell caught a pass over the middle from Jalen Hurts and was pushed late by Franklin. Apparently this had been going on for a while, with the all-pro center and Colts linebacker jawing all practice, but enough was enough as Kelce ran right over him at full speed like a Mack truck. What? Sorry, it was a little more serious than that, with Josh Tolentino sharing Kelce and Franklin began throwing punches along with several other players from both teams before Kelce ended up at the bottom of a pile of 20 players. Thankfully, the 35-year-old was okay and everyone escaped unscathed, but it wasn't a surprise that the brawl ended practice. Quite frankly, the shock was seeing the Bird Center go all Kelce 316 on them Indy dudes. Yet I'm not really a fan of how it all went down. Kenny G kinda was though.
Man, we're a team. You know, we ain't gonna let nobody come in our house and take over, but we know we're gonna continue to work hard each and every day. We whoop their ass off.
Okay, it's not like playoff Kenny's inciting violence, but the RB1 said he loves Kelce and appreciates being backed up by the legend. However, as far as the whole "we kicked their behinds" comment, it depends on who you ask, because Zaire Franklin definitely had his own opinion afterward.
You know, sometimes your speed ain't they speed. People get offended. That's life, so we'll be okay. We got some good work in. We compete on Thursday.
Never saw Kelce coming, I guess, obviously.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, you know, obviously growing up in Philly, watching him play for a long time, a lot of respect for him. Talked to him a little bit after we played him last year. You know, thought the OGs would at least look me in the eye before, you know, but it's all good. I'm going to get a chance to look him in the eye on Thursday, so we're going to be okay.
All right, so not a good look from the Eagles captain. So it's no wonder that Colts defensive end Dayo Odeyingbo wouldn't stop yelling 62's a bitch on the way to the locker room. Although it doesn't appear that the teams can settle this on Thursday's preseason game, because despite the fact that the Colts announced they'll be playing several starters, Sirianni and the rest of the staff have remained tight-lipped. Getting back to the fight though, the future Hall of Famer was very remorseful for what happened toward the end of practice while taking all the blame.
I want to reiterate that, you know, that's not something that I should have done or should happen out there. You know, it was a cheap shot, and I've had a lot of joint practices, and I've never had anything like that happen.
Look, there's no way around it. Kelce was definitely the guilty party, although at least he admitted the mistake and took ownership of it, while also going on to say, I think very highly of the guys that were out there, in particular 44 in Franklin. I think he's a tremendous player. I think all the guys up front are, and they brought a lot of intensity to the day, which made the practice intense, but I didn't handle things properly there at the end. I agree. You guys know I love the 62, but there's no doubt, at least to me anyway, that he crossed the line. However, it's also worth pointing out that this wasn't the only fight during the joint session, as everything had seemingly been building in that direction, when earlier Derek Barnett made a strip sack on Colts quarterback Anthony Richardson, which caused some shoving, followed by Barnett quickly assuming a boxer's stance before the players were separated quickly. You didn't really think there'd be an Eagles fight storyline without mentioning Mr. It's Always Him, did you? Yeah, well, Barnett showed up twice actually. On another instance when Jalen Carter stripped the ball from Richardson's hands, making Colts players mad as they started to shove JC, before DB ran in to say, yo dog, don't mess with the bread man.
Rule number 1. No touching of the hair or face.
Alright, he probably didn't say that, but I'm not so much opposed to hearing about a vet standing up for a rookie. Like my guy David said, I know some Eagles fans don't like him because of the penalties, and I agree he needs to dial that down a tad during games, but I like his aggression. Every team needs an enforcer, and Derek Barnett is theirs, so I'm gonna embrace it. I don't know, man, am I allowed to pick and choose? You're most likely aware that I've blasted Barnett in the past for getting into it with other scrums and other teams, or at least starting stuff, yet I don't mind it as much here because I agree with you do need an enforcer, but let me know how you guys are feeling in the comments. Although we might have another enforcer who continues to emerge on the roster. Remember, rookie Sidney Brown has one mission.
I want to be a feared player.
Well, the heat-seeking missile did just that during practice, putting the fear of God into Indianapolis tight end Mo Alie-Cox, delivering, as Jeff Mosier described it, a soul-crushing hit over the middle to break up a pass. Admittedly, he probably would have been flagged in a real game for hitting a defenseless receiver, but it just speaks to the non-stop intensity of practice Tuesday. By the way, that all happened with the first team, so Brown continues to make a push for the starting job. Yet it's worth noting Justin Evans and Terrell Edmonds continued to be the main rotation on the first team next to Reed Blankenship, and Evans started with the defense during the scrimmage to end practice. Kayvon Wallace also mostly ran with the second team, but did make a great play on an interception. However, Wallace ended up getting called for pass interference, which Sirianni didn't care for, so went ahead and picked up the flag and handed it back to the ref. Cornerback Mekhi Garner, who's trying to make the roster, was back in action after sitting out of practice with an ankle injury and picked off former Eagles quarterback Gardner Minshew before also getting flagged, but did come back to intercept Minshew a second time and then casually flipped the ball to the Colts wide receiver after the interception.
He was giving them the business.
Guys, look, I love playing with a little attitude, but at some point these extracurricular activities catch up with you, which I don't think our QB1 just loved. Despite Hurts saying you definitely want a team that sticks up for each other, but he would have preferred to finish practice, especially with a couple Eagles legends at practice in former head coach and Hall of Famer Dick Vermeil, and Shady, LaShawn McCoy, even came to gather some material for his debates with James Jones. Jones believes Bears quarterback Justin Fields is more talented than Jalen Hurts, in case you didn't get the reference. Another great running back was also in attendance, but not playing, after the Colts announced Jonathan Taylor can seek other trades. And while I think it's absolutely ridiculous to think JT is a possibility, I guess it never hurts to look. Yet Elliott Shore-Parks went as far to say the Eagles don't have an RB1, and although he doesn't think the Birds would actually do it, it makes a lot of sense in order to bring in a bona fide starter. I'm with Sean Bradley, though, who said, JT, my brother, but our RB room is straight fire. Or 3 fires? Basically, we don't need and everyone's about to see. Plus, how would Jalen come up with another unique handshake for JT? In all seriousness, the running back room was putting in the work, with Kenny G and DeAndre Swift making several impressive catches, and CBS's Jeff Kerr noting Agent Zero just keeps finding ways to get open, catching a pass from Mariota for a big gain. And even Rashaad Penny got work with the ones, showing that same explosiveness and patience we've heard about all camp, where Reuben Frank said, Penny is starting to look like quite a weapon. This next part won't come as a shock, but the same could be said for the Jalen Hurts to AJ Brown connection, with Swole Batman winning multiple reps in one-on-ones while Jalen dropped a dime for the score. The best part was AJ giving the ball to his daughter Jersey after the rep, and then he came right back to toast Colts cornerback Kenny Moore, making a crazy one-handed grab, but are we really surprised by that at this point? Of course, the Birds have 2 number 1s, and DeVonta Smith certainly helped out his quarterback, who made a really impressive throw after recovering a fumbled snap, resetting his feet in the pocket, and then delivering a 40-yard touchdown to Smitty on a high crosser. Josh Tolentino said the play was very reminiscent of the stellar catches the Slim Reaper made at Washington last year. And then later, DeVonta straight up mossed a defender during 11-on-11s for a 40-yard completion down the sideline where he was able to outmuscle the DB for the ball. I mean, come on. I know it's just practice, but the difficulty level of that catch is absurd. We already know this, but cool to see D-Jax jumping in and saying, Smitty and AJ are for sure the best wide receiver duo in the league. And remember, we've already had Hall of Famer Randy Moss admit when asked about the top receiving duos in the NFL that the Eagles 2 would be at the top, saying I'd put them at the top 100%. If there's any other I could compare, it'd probably be the Bengals, but I don't really think there's a combination better than them. Yeah, it's kind of unfair, but if it works, why stop? So Jalen went right back to Smitty for a 10-yard touchdown to complete the drive and crush the Ponies' spirits. It also was probably a little scary for Steichen and the Colts to see Sirianni and the offensive coordinator Brian Johnson experimenting, showing a shotgun look with DeVonta in the backfield, and then having Smith run a Texas route. Oh yeah, and then the Eagles ran a trick play where Kenny Gainwell got the handoff and then threw it down the field to tight end Grant Calcaterra for a long gain, which Jalen Hurts really enjoyed.
Yeah, that's actually Shane Steichen's play. That's Coach Steichen's play. So we never ran it last year, but we ran it against him for the first time, so that was pretty cool.
All right, maybe it's a little strange to run trick plays in a joint practice, but I think it's cool the way the Birds poked a little fun at Steichen. Although I should point out, Philly didn't dominate the entire practice, as cornerback James Bradbury got dusted by wide receiver Alec Pierce, and Cam Jurgens reportedly gave up a couple would-be sacks or at least QB pressures. Linebacker Zach Cunningham, who appears to be solidified as the starter and getting just about all of the first-team reps next to Jacoby Dean, had a tough day in coverage. Although that's not totally unexpected since I think most of us realize he's not typically a great coverage guy, so it makes me think if we do end up seeing Cunningham win the starting job, he may rotate with Terrell Edmunds on obvious passing downs, with the Birds electing to go with Dean as the lone linebacker, but curious to know what y'all think. One guy who's definitely on the hot seat is our punter, Aaron Siposs, with Eagles insider Dave Spadaro saying Thursday's preseason game is an important game and Siposs knows it, so everyone keep your eyes open. I think that's pretty telling because if Spuds is saying a guy's potentially on the bubble, that's really saying something. Yet it seems like SI's Ed Cracks disagrees since, after all, Siposs is the field goal holder, and the last thing you want is for Jake Elliott to have in the back of his mind that the hold may not be good, so tough to bring somebody in now. Okay, that's a fair point, but I still think I'd be inclined to mess with that chemistry to find a better punting option. I mean, come on, Jake's a stud, but what side of the argument are you guys on? Either way, I'd say they're better off than any offensive line trying to block Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, where Colts beat writer Nate Atkins shared Indy's attempt to block JD and JC went about how you'd imagine.
Not great, Bob.
Yeah, it's difficult for a lot of guys, but I loved hearing the dancing bear was active, sacking Anthony Richardson on the opening drive, and Jalen Carter also made a play when Richardson went to run. Carter was right there to say hello and whistle the play dead. And then on one instance, Jalen Carter tossed offensive lineman Carter O'Donnell to the ground, stood over him, and then gestured to the opposing sideline. Followed on the very next play, the defensive tackle housed O'Donnell with a power move and then glanced towards the Colts again. The Breadman has been so dominant that Big Play Slay even ventured to give him a new nickname recently of the Baby Rhino? I don't know. I prefer Breadman, although I can understand the whole Baby Rhino element to his game. As intense as the practice was, it was cool to see Slay stay afterward to work with the young DBs on the Colts. And even GM Howie Roseman caught up with Zaire Franklin to say, hey, no hard feelings, right? Just in case we trade for you or something, you know? Obviously, he didn't actually say that, but I think we all realized to not count out a potential move from Howie, even though the Eagles training camp is officially over and the final preseason game is tomorrow with the Colts, which, reminder, we'll be live streaming that game and spinning for your chance to win 2 regular season tickets to any game of your choosing. So swing on by for your chance to win and maybe chat on who's winning starting jobs. This has been the Philly Special.